Welcome to the Draftstars AFL show with Smatho and Roody.
With thanks to Daily Fantasy Rankings and Draftstars. Welcome to Round 8 action of the Draftstars AFL show with Smatho and Roody. Thank you guys who are watching us on the live stream, and welcome to the guys who are watching the replay or listening to the podcast. We're back. We had a week off last week. I had some matters to attend to in terms of a 10-year anniversary with the Dale, so I was a bit offline in the middle of nowhere, so I thought I'd give Roody the week off, and he said, thank you very much, Smatho. Best coach versus Richmond, worst game of DFS ever. So Roody's primed for 2 games.
I can't believe that I got bumped for a measly 10-year anniversary. I mean, where are your priorities?
No, your priorities was I don't want to do this game.
That's also true. That's also true.
Now, as you can see, if you're watching the live stream, Jackies are on the march. Hopefully, we can get a win in the NBL Grand Final. Little Hobart boy, but Roody, it's been a big couple of weeks in AFL. Obviously, COVID is starting to ravage again amongst the clubs, which is bad news if you're trying to run a season-long AFL fantasy team. But what the great thing about Draftstars here, no commitment. Daily fantasy football is where it's at on Draftstars. And tonight, we're going to be talking about the $90,000 prize pool available Friday. But as you can see down in the banner just down below here, golden tickets for the $500,000 AFL Live Final are still flying out the door, still very popular. Now, since we missed last week, Rory, we need to give a little bit of a shout-out to all the winners that got tickets in the meantime. So let me ring up the last 2 weeks of winners, and look at these names here. Some that you're quite familiar with, some of you who are new to the scene, but congratulations to the following people. Here we go. Texcoin, Jed Canada, Crystal Brothers, Ugly Sweater, JK123, I don't know who that guy is, Kenna458, Cho22, LB7777, S. Walshy 18, Procession, Aussie DR, Eagle Hunter, Footy Science, Back to Sash, Nicky United, Cat Taz, JRG 1990, the Italianos, and BMac 58. Congratulations on winning either your first or your second ticket to the $500,000 AFL Live Final. I'm looking forward to catching you guys up at the event.
Hey, question without notice, Smatho. Do you reckon with your powers, your newfound powers at Draftstars, just looking at those usernames, and I've noticed recently, I've been disappointed with the newcomers and their usernames. Could we potentially, throwing it out there, your bosses can give you the green light because you don't actually have as much power as you like to think you do. Could we perhaps have a vote on Twitter, best Draftstars username, and maybe that person could get some kind of prize? What do you reckon?
Oh, I reckon it's a pretty handy idea. We might be able to get in the database of, obviously, there is some little power that I can check out the database of usernames and maybe pluck out some extraordinary names. But off the top of your head, Roody, do you have any that comes to mind?
I think the favourite, and, I love Land, is always, it's a good one. It's a very, very good one.
It is a very, very good one. All right.
It's a pity he can't play DFS, though.
It is a pity. But, look, I am loving life here at Draftstars. And just give you a tip, just keep an eye on the Draftstars socials in the next couple of weeks. We've got some exciting things to implement into the platform. So stay tuned. I've been working quite hard on a couple of things. So stay tuned, the Draftstars at Twitter or on the Facebook, and I'll make some announcements hopefully down the track. All right, ready? Let's talk about 2 games. We've got Power and the Bulldogs, which are starting at 7:30. They're at the Adelaide Oval. There is a little chance of rain at the Adelaide Oval tomorrow, but I don't think it'll be too significant in terms of the amount of rain. Currently, the Power are actually favourites in this one. I thought I was going to write up the Bulldogs saying they're a little slight favourites, but Key Out, which we'll talk about in a minute, has swung the markets to Power's position. And then we've got a second game, which starts at 8:40 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is the Dockers and the Kangaroos at Optus Stadium. It's fine conditions over there, so we don't have to worry about the weather there. And obviously, North are massive underdogs at $7.50. There's a $90,000 prize pool for both games, so we're not doing $90,000 for one game. We've got to do it for both games. There are individual contests available as well if you want to play those as well. Rudy, let me bring up the team changes for this particular game. We'll start here with the Port and Western Bulldogs. And obviously, big changes there at the Doggies with Mitch Wallace, who's obviously he came back in the side, he's out. But obviously Marcus Bontempelli is being managed. No changes at Port. Xavier Dursmith was the medi-sub last week and probably will get another go in the medical sub as well. What do you think of this one, first of all, before we look at the second game?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see what's happened to the Bulldogs, and I don't kind of believe that they're just. I mean, they're not doing well. It's clear to say that they're really in a bit of a slump. But they just played a prelim final, and just played a grand final, and yes. For a lot of that game, it looked like they were going to win. So I refuse to believe that they have suddenly lost their mojo, forgotten how to play footy. And also, I don't believe that Port, who have been struggling for most of the first part of the season, have just remembered how to play football. They played in terrible conditions. Did you watch that game, Smatho, the Port Saints game?
No, I didn't actually. No,
it was. I mean, it wasn't raining, but it might as well have been because no one could pick up the footy. So I just don't think you can read into any form guide from that Port game. They do seem to be playing a little bit better, but nothing that's made me sit up and go, "Whoa, look at Port now!" So this is a real hard game to pick if you're a punting man or woman. Really tough one. I don't believe Port are back, and nor do I believe that the Bulldogs are completely gone yet. That said, they would want to start showing some form. They need to get some wins on the board. Ins and outs. Now, clearly, I like the way you kind of said. That was a good one then. You said the big change, Mitch Wallace's big drops, was injured or whatever. Obviously the Bont is the big one there, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out what's going to happen. We've got some CBAs to dish out. And the Bulldogs traditionally do keep a very tight midfield balance. So I think we just lock in Dunkley, Treloar, and maybe McRae moves a little bit back inside. He has been a little bit outside recently. Libba as well. So nothing, probably I reckon I'm going to have a little bit more interest in McRae than I would have had otherwise. And his price has come down, but we'll get to that later. But yeah, so pretty easy to work out what's happening there. The other Bulldogs changes are quite inconsequential in terms of DFS.
Yeah, let's look at this second game. I've got on the screen here. So Fremantle had some issues with COVID protocol. Look, these players, apart from Blake Acres, are not exactly fantasy relevant from either a season long or even a daily fantasy. But we are missing Acres, Griffin Lloyd Meek, Michael Frederick, Rory Lobb, and Travis Collier. They're all out. Into the side, big in Sean Darcy comes back into the ruck. Hayden Young, Heath Chapman, Liam Henry, and we've got a debut for Jai Amiss. As for the Kangaroos, Jed Anderson, I think that's his first game of the year, Rudy, I do believe. So, and Ben McKay is back from suspension. Aidan Corr is also back in for Bonner, Jack Mahoney, Miller Bergman, and Nick Larkey, who's now also out with suspension. So, multiple changes here. Key Darcy, obviously, and obviously some new blood in Jai Amiss for us.
Yeah, good ones there to discuss. We'll get to the rucks and Darcy will feature in that. Amiss looks like he's got one of those names that newspaper journalists love, because when he kicks a bad, it's going to be Jai doesn't miss or something like that, whatever, But it looks like the kid can play. He kicked 7 or 8 goals last weekend. And they are missing a lot of their goal kickers. I did a little check of the leading goal kickers, and I think they're missing something like 5 of their top 7 leading goal kickers, Freo. So they will win. I mean, they're playing really good footy. They're really fun to watch. Freo have been fun to watch for a number of years when they're up and about. They play fast footy. Their forwards are really underrated. Rory Lobb, it's a shame that he's missing because he's been having a really great season. And I would have been really heavy on him in my teams. So they're playing some really good footy, and I reckon that those Amiss and maybe Treaky could figure in a lot of teams. But in terms of the net result of their COVID situation, I actually think that they have a net positive. Like you said, the only person that's really they're going to miss is Blake Acres, who, again, like many Freo players, has been having an underrated season so far. But there's plenty of people who can pick up his slack, like Young, like Chapman, and a couple other players that we'll get to later. For North, Jed Anderson coming back after his COVID vaccine reluctance does muddy the waters a little bit for their midfield rotations. But, I wouldn't say that many people are looking at North Melbourne midfield rotations that heavily anyway.
Now, before we go through the positions of the game, I've got a couple of things for you already. First of all, Dylan, love your idea. JT sends his regards. He says hello to us, which is fantastic. And then obviously he Trent said wrong. We think his North Melbourne is going to be all over. And look, yeah, it is a smallish Fremantle forward line there if you take out Josh Tracy. Now, the second thing I want to do for us, I actually want to give us a bit of a shout out to Daily Fantasy Rankings for all their tools for AFL Daily Fantasy. It's all refreshed, ready to go for Friday night. You can click on the individual banners if you look at the cheat sheets, or you can look at points against, ruck analysis, taggers. It's all there at dailyfantasyrankings.com.au. All right, Rudy, let's have a look at this $90,000 contest. 2 games, as I said, not the individual ones. Golden tickets are still there available, ready to go. And let's start here at the rucks. This is probably a hard time. There's not exactly the who's who here, but Sean Darcy, after his injury, is back at $12,450. Todd Godstead is the second highest salary available, just at $8,670. Coleman Jones at 8-1. Stephen Martin, the old man, at 7-3. Sammy Hayes, we thought he's going to be pretty huge. He hasn't done much at 7-2. And then Zane Cordy, who gets a little bit of ruck status there at $6,000. So, look, of course, you can go to Darcy at $12,450 if you can find value out there. But look, he's not exactly match proof or injury proof. And then you look at someone like Toddy Goldstone, who had a 90 last week, but that was, not exactly against fantastic opposition. And obviously the number one ruckman is injured. So that's probably the decision you might have to make yourself to start with. And if you don't like those two, then you can just close your eyes and pick someone else.
Well, okay. I guess Smatho, you're doing this solo today because you asked me about the rucks and then you just gave us the ruck breakdown. So let's move on to defenders. Okay. No, seriously, mate. You're exactly right in everything you said. Then Darcy, clearly, if he is fit, and who knows, you would have thought with someone like him, you don't risk him. He clearly has the highest ceiling of all of those guys, by a long, long way. And Goldstein and CCJ, they played against TDK last week against Carlton. So I don't think you can read into those. That they both had really good scores, but I don't think you can read into that too much at all, unfortunately for them. It's going to be how many have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Roll a dice, mate. Give them each a number, roll the dice, and put them in. I think I might go to Sam Hayes. He is a mature body. I know he hasn't scored well at all. Don't get me wrong. I can't click Steph Martin. He cannot move. He just can't move. And so Sam Hayes is someone who, he's a mature body. He should be better than he has scored. He's a proven scorer in the Sandful. I think people might be a bit scared off the fact that he hasn't really delivered as much as people thought he would, especially those in the season-long community. So basically, in my pool would be all of them because I guess they've all, apart from Martin, I think they've all got a chance of a 70-ish score. I don't think Goldstein's getting another 90. Darcy, first game back from a little bit of injury layoff. What's his ceiling? Is it the 120 that we know he can get, or is it more of an 80, which he has been getting? So it's a really tough call in the rucks, but I'm not going to waste my money, I don't think.
Having no lob kind of tips in his favour a little bit, where he's not going to get a chop out or even a 60-40 kind of ruck duty. So
Tracy, whatever his bloody name is, he's not a short man, so he probably will take a bit of a chop out, you'd think. I'm just checking his height now. What is he? Oh, actually, he's smaller than I thought he was. He's only 193. Who is their backup then, Smatho?
Well, Nat Fyfe is taller than him, I guess, so he's not playing. Nothing comes to mind. No, nothing comes to mind because you always think of Lob or even Taberner who can help out, but they're both not there. But anyway, that's something to think about if you about the rucks.
Yep. Let's move on.
Let's move on to defence. Now we've done a few Bulldogs slates over the first few rounds, and we were kind of disappointed in terms of their output. But last week, I think they turned that around with the likes of Bailey Dale having 100, Caleb Daniel having 100, and even all the way down here to Ed Richards, who we've been trying to get him going all year. He has actually had an 87 there last week. Obviously against a Port side who they have millions of backs for Port, and they're all priced up at around that 11K. So Roody, Bonner, Burn Jones, Burton, Dan Houston. Like, if you're going to target let's talk about this first game start of all. We've got Bulldogs players who can potentially have good ceilings, and we've got Port players who have really got good ceilings. But their prices are a bit not appetizing.
Yeah, and you're going to have to make sacrifices. Apart from the really, really low 6K players, there isn't a huge amount of value. There's a couple of people in the midfield who I want to talk about later on, but they're midfielders. And so if you play those value plays in the midfield, you got to, it's tough. It's tough to get what you want, the perfect balance in this slate, okay? Now, in terms of the role of all of these Port defenders, Burton's probably the one, Houston we know pushes up through the mid, and so he doesn't play that traditional flank role anymore, so that's why his ceiling is high, but his price is sky high as well. And then we've got the chip kickers around, Burton and Bonner and Burn Jones. They are those traditional halfback flankers, but unfortunately they've all got really similar ceilings, and it's really hard to pick, who's going to go off. So the only option then is to just have, a team that you switch them out. So you enter multiple teams and you have one with Burton, one with Bonner, or maybe you pair them together in one setup so you can try and get those +6s, which could be into +12s, I would stay away from the Port key defenders, though, who are really hard to pick. Like if you get on the back of a Cleary 90, then, congratulations, you've done well and you're going to win Powerball as well, In terms of the Bulldogs, guys, I actually really do like them in this game. I like Bailey Dale. I think he probably will be a semi-popular play, depending on if people choose to spend up in their midfield or not, and pair him. So Ed Richards, I checked the heat map just before we came on, and he's finally in that traditional wing role, that Lockie Hunter kind of role that we thought he would be in a couple of weeks ago, and now he's definitely there. So I really don't mind a Dale-Richards pairing and hope that actually Dale tries to hit Richards up on those transition plays.
Got a new player. I wouldn't say new player. He has played before, but here at the min price, $6,000 is Buku Kamos. Now, he's actually been playing VFL up forward. I've seen a couple of clips where he's been kicking goals there. Could be popular. In terms of his fantasy value, can he push out a 50 or 60 for us?
I saw him play a preseason game against the D's at Marvel Stadium maybe last year or the year before. Can't remember. COVID's made all my years blend into one. And he showed a bit. He's it's not surprising that he has named in the back line. Sorry, he's back line available, but named in the forward line because he's quite a versatile player. I would say that he would need a couple of snags to hit value, though. Role uncertainty, Bulldogs, Beveridge. It's a risky play for me. I'd much rather go for a Miss or Tracy.
Fair enough. All right, let's have a look at this second game. Look, it's pretty hard to get excited about North Melbourne. Obviously, with no Aaron Hall. Luke McDonald's a bit, wishy-washy. Does he get off the chain? I mean, his fantasy scoring is pretty good there for $12,000. Down below that is Bailey Scott. He's at $10,200. Did have a 90 last week, and he's actually defender midfield available. And then from there, it falls away quite dramatically with only $8,000 guys spattered throughout. Whereas for Freo, COVID is obviously changed things up, but it hasn't really decimated their defence. So we still got Hayden Young, we still got Luke Ryan, Jordan Clark, Heath Chapman's coming back. He had a nice price there at 9,520. The stats say, look, you should really avoid North defenders in a 40-50 handicap kind of match. Any love for either of these teams here?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's funny when you look at people like North Melbourne defenders just on the basis that they think the ball is going to be down there a lot. And sometimes that doesn't really pan out as well as you think it might, just because they get smashed so badly that they don't actually get to the ball, Of those guys, obviously Luke McDonald was still with Aaron Hall out, is the high ceiling play, but he's so streaky, Again, he's just, yes, he should definitely be in your pool because he's a great GPP play, but it's tough to rely on him. And he's not cheap anymore either. Like he was 10, 11 a couple of weeks ago, and now he's up to 12. So I don't know, but just below him is Luke Ryan, who is someone I have in a couple of season-long teams, and has a great historical ceiling. Again, quite streaky, but if he has one of his, 12 mark games, well then, he's got 100 straight away. Of course, will the ball get to the North Melbourne backline? That's the risk that you take in loading up on Fremantle defenders. Heath Chapman's had a great year. Hayden Young's had a great year. Jordan Clark, with those two back, with Chapman and Young back, will probably suffer a little bit. He has had a good couple of weeks, but he'll probably suffer a little bit with those other young guys back. But then again, if you take the theory that that Freo are going to win quite easily here, then there's jump time opportunity for all of those guys as well. Again, avoiding key defenders. Some slates you can take a chance on a key defender and hope they get a 9-10 game, but I just don't think that's going to happen with any of the really, really cheap defenders here. It's a bit of a shame that Darcy Tucker doesn't have defender status, which he has in seasons past, because if he had defender status, he'd be a lock for me, absolute lock. Yep. So basically, those are the guys. Don't mind a little punt on Luke Ryan, and Chapman's probably the one who's in the best form in terms of fantasy production.
All right, let's move on to the midfield. And obviously, when you've got the Bulldogs and Port on a slate here, you're going to have some high premium midfielders available to you. I think out of the top 7 here, 6 are in the first game, and then you got Andrew Brayshaw there at 17,590. Let's look above 15,000. So also we talked about Houston already. McRae seems to be a very generous price at 15,440 when you compare to his teammate Josh Dunkley's at 17,690. So that's a 2K difference there. Obviously, Bailey Smith is having an awesome season fantasy-wise, 17,290. And then we've got Travis Boak and Ollie Wines. Now, Ollie Wines looks pretty overpriced at 16,030, but we still have that 36 heart scare score lingering there that's kind of bumping down his form and his average there. So let's have a look at this top 6-7 above 15K. What's your
I am listening to you. It looks like I'm not looking at you right now. That's only because I'm looking at Jack McRae's heat map as we speak, just to see what he's been doing in last week. And obviously he's in the midfield still a fair bit. He's still been seeing his CBAs, but definitely he's pushing to the flanks a lot more, than normal. And he's one of those guys who, gosh, if he was in any other team, he'd just be a frontline mid every single day of the week, But Beveridge loves to have this flexibility. He loves to push people around. And in many ways, it won him one flag and it very nearly won him another one as well. So there's merit in it. So, all right. So of the expensive guys, Josh Dunkley, I still would have in quite a few teams just because I think he still has the highest ceiling on the slate. There is enough value to get him in. You don't need to get to these. I don't think you need to have multiple, even 15K plus guys on this slate. I think you can build quite a good looking team with a front headlined by Dunkley, and then get some good plays in other positions and get some value in too. So Dunkley would definitely be my main option of the expensive guys. Brayshaw, not interested in that price. Bailey Smith, of course, the ceilings are definitely there, but I don't have a lot of confidence in that price either. Travis Boak and Ollie Wines, even though it's a nighttime Ollie Wines, and we know he does love the bright lights. I think they're reasonable plays. Probably Travis Boak is someone who will get overlooked here. So that could be a nice little pivot onto Boak and offer the guys around the same price. Houston, Amon, no and no. Simpkin, no, but then definitely Treloar and Libba with no Bontempelli. I think they're both really good plays there. Libba, I like as a, I played him last week and he wasn't nearly as highly owned as I thought he would be. And Treloar is playing great footy at the moment, like he really is. Probably maybe a little bit of a risk that Treloar is the one who gets sucked into the forward role that Bont sometimes plays, just because he does have probably a better goal sense. But then you could probably say the same thing with Libba, who has been living in the forward line a little bit on a bit of a break from his midfield duties. In the next tier down, you got people like Sarong, Brody. SPP is now too expensive to play for me. And I don't have a lot of interest in that kind of 11 to 13 range. Sarong is a favourite of mine, but I don't know. I don't know if his role's changing or he just doesn't seem to be around the ball as much. I think he's getting sucked out to the wing a fair bit too. But there are a couple of people who I want to mention, though, Smatho, and you can jump in if I miss anyone. Conor Rosie looked like he was just, a shadow of the player that he was. And do you remember those discussions where people actually thought he was a better pick than Sam Walsh? Yes. And everyone who thought that was just getting laughed at on Twitter. Last few games, though, to his credit, he stopped the showboaty rubbish and he's actually getting dirty and being thrown into the midfield. He had only 9 CBAs last week, but it's 9 more than he was getting in the first few rounds. At 10,000 with 100 ceiling, I think, 100 plus ceiling, he's definitely someone I'm interested in. And then
I'll pull you up there. I'll pull you up because he's only had 9 because how many goals were kicked on the Cairns last week? Yeah,
good point. Good point. It was a low-scoring game. So, okay, all right. See, this is why you need someone who's rooted in data like Smatho. I'm an instinct person, and usually those instincts are wrong. So that's why you've got to trust the data. All right. There's someone who I do want to talk about, though, and that is someone who I mentioned before, is Darcy Tucker. I think he's a really good price. I know that I mentioned you got Hayden Young and Heath Chapman coming back, but I reckon Darcy Tucker actually, he's had some CBAs recently. And I like the price there, 8,000. It's a really good price for someone like Tucker, who has probably a high 80s, 90s ceiling, especially with Akers missing. I think he is a like-for-like replacement with Akers. Any others of those cheaper guys, Smatho, that you're interested in?
No, I was going to ask you about Tucker, and I was also ask you about Nathan O'Driscoll. Obviously, he has a ceiling there at 109, 63, 56. Obviously, players been out of COVID. There could be a positional role change for him.
Yeah, wasn't that 109 against when West Coast first had all those players out though? They were absolutely decimated.
He had a 60 against West Coast, and he had 109 against the Giants. 6 tackles.
Oh, it's the Giants. Sorry, I just read that. Okay. Look, he's. It's funny when players like him come on the scene, supporters are like, play him in the midfield, and they just can't. He will be a midfielder eventually, but look, you could throw him in. I think if you were going to play him, I'd play him in the back line. I wouldn't waste a midfield spot on him.
Yeah, because the reason why I'm asking about these 3-hour players because North Melbourne was obviously giving up plenty of fantasy points to opposition midfielders. I think they're first or second according to the DFR tool. So from obviously when you talk about a data perspective, when you've got North Melbourne opposition letting opposition midfielders have the ball, I'm just trying to find your spots here where obviously, Tucker is a great call, but just other players that we can mix in because obviously you said Brayshaw's a little bit too expensive to throw in at 17,000. He might get 150, but you want him to get that 125 plus, and then you start looking at blokes like Brody and Sarong and Mundy, which at $12,000, it's not exactly sexy. So hence I'm just going a little bit lower there. So, but it's a little tough little two game slate, this one. Let's move on to the forwards. Obviously dominated by midfielders once again. So Dunkley, Treloar, Liberatore, Brody, like we've all discussed them. Lockie Schultz is the first key forward there, if you want to call him a key forward, at 11,760, coming off a 70 last week, but 120 against Carlton, which was obviously a great performance there. Jack Zebel has been named in the forward line once again. He's just there at 10,580. Are you expecting a role change, or he's going to still be dying up in the forward line?
Either. I don't care what his role change is. I'm never playing Jack Zebel.
Yeah, fair enough. The Astronauts there at 10,200. Back-to-back 55, 56, 66 games doesn't scream out, pick me. Robbie Gray is still under 10,000. So he has that ability to be a game breaker in terms of obviously winning games and then being fantasy relevant. 9,450. And then Michael Waters, if you want to see if he can get something going, he's there at 9,020. But the way things are going here, Rudy, it looks like you're probably plugging in midfielders in your forward spot than anything here.
Yeah, I think there are two ways to play this. You go for your midfield stack and try and get value around the ground somewhere else and put your Dunkley or Treloar as your midfielders, and then just play extra as your forwards and play extra midfielders. Or the other thing, you can try and target the high scores from the games, right? So if you assume that, if you think that Fremantle is going to win by a handsome margin, then someone needs to kick their goals. And like I alluded to before, they are missing 5 of their top 7 goal scorers. So they are going to have to find other avenues to goal. So the guy you mentioned, Schultz, I don't know, Smatho, I don't think you can let it pass that you called him a key forward, because he is definitely a man of smaller stature. I don't think you can call him a key forward. But I actually think is a really good pickup by you there. He's definitely, what's he got? 3 shots on goal, 6, 2, 2, and 5 and nothing so far. So he does like to pepper the score, the goals. So yeah, he's someone who is on my radar. And also a little bit of a left of centre play, perhaps. Switkowski for the same reason. He's been very consistent on his 70s there, and is chipping in with 1-2 goals a game. Walters, you could maybe play him and think this is the get right spot for him, because he definitely doesn't look like the damaging player that he has been in seasons past. That said, at 9,000, he has been getting 60s for the last few weeks without really playing that well. So without some of those forward options missing, maybe this is the perfect get right spot for him. But then again, we've got Tracy and a miss. I think they're fine to take punts on. I would probably be, as crazy as it sounds, considering he's a debutant, I'd probably be higher on a miss than Tracy. Just because Tracy's had a few games and Freeall playing well, and he's still not really scoring even. And I know he's got the competition with Lob still down there, but yeah, so they're both. I think you could even make an argument for a Tracy a miss forward line. There's a double, just spend 12K together, and then another cheap ruckman, Darcy Tucker. And then all of a sudden you've got 14,000 or 13,000 to spend on your average midfielder. And that's certainly an approach that I'm definitely going to take.
All right. I like what you're thinking there. Yeah.
And sorry, the other thing that I needed to mention was key forwards against the Bulldogs. It is a thing, ladies and gentlemen. It's happening every single week. Key forwards are just toweling up the Bulldogs, as they have in seasons past. It is their Achilles heel, and who did they play last week? Bulldogs. It's just slipped my mind. Sorry, everyone.
The Bombers. Was it the Bombers?
The Bombers. Yeah. And let's just jump in 1 second. I think it was Peter Wright got a couple. Sorry, I should have these stats, ready to go. Yeah, so Peter Wright got 4. So 4 to Peter Wright, 1 goal to Sam Draper, and Tom Cutler, who's not a small man either, he got 2 goals as well, right? And that's Essendon. That's Essendon. And they are really, really bad. Disappointingly bad, Smatho. I actually thought that the Bombers might have a good year, but they are really, really bad. And actually, just so you know, guys, for the rest of the round, the other really primo matchup for key forwards is Essendon themselves. So Bulldogs and Essendon are leaking goals to key forwards. So Marshall, I was hoping Georgiades and Finlayson one of them might miss, because it does make it a bit harder to nail this. But Marshall was awesome that game where he kicked a bag. And I know that the opposition wasn't much, but he's someone who I would be high on. And just because of the way that people are going to target midfielders in the forward line, I think targeting these key forwards, both the Fremantle cheapies and some Port players to capitalise on the matchup, I think that could be a good idea too.
So it sounds like you've got 3 kind of options here. You can either stack your midfielders in your forward line, go for the stars and scrubs with your Fremantle cheap guys, or back in the data and back in the Port key forwards.
Yeah, and also there's one other guy who, sorry, I just slipped my mind, who I've been really impressed with is Paul Curtis from North Melbourne, right? There were big raps on this guy. He's only played 2 games. He's still 6,100, and he's had a couple of 50s, and he plays a real high half-forward role. So he's a lead-up link man kind of forward. And you might think, well, hang on, it's North Melbourne. Surely he doesn't get that many touches. Well, he's got 13, 11, but 5 and 4 marks in both games and a goal in each game as well. He's actually had, in his first 2 games, he's had 6 shots on goal across those 2 games. So he'll be a really low owned player, absolute, 5% range. But could be an interesting pivot if you think people are going to target the cheap Fremantle forwards to get some value.
Okay. Any final thoughts before we get your team of the week?
Yeah, my thought is I have no idea what my team is, because I'm really confused by this slate. I'll be really honest. I've changed my mind so many times, and even during this conversation, you've talked me into O'Driscoll, which is someone who I wasn't even considering. So we'll go with a team. We'll plug in a team and we'll see. I don't even know if this is going to work in terms of salary, so we might have to make some changes along the way. All right. Let's start with, I'm going to plug in a couple of midfielders first. I'm going to plug in Darcy Tucker, and I'm going to plug in Conor Rosie as well. All right, so going for a couple of value players in my midfield. I'm then going to go to the back line and plug in Bailey Dale as my pay-up option. And then I'm going to go for, I might either I'll do 2 versions of this team when I play, just for full disclosure. I'll have one with Ed Richards, but I'm going to go with Smatho's man, Nathan O'Driscoll, and chuck him as a cheaper option in the back line as well. The Ed Richards they're like a few $100 difference, these 2.
Yes.
From here, let us go to just go double check what I've done on my phone here. Yep, cool. So let's go and lock in Jai Amiss.
The minimum price there at 6,000.
Yep. So lock in Jai Amiss, and let's go shopping now. And also we're going to lock into the forward line Josh Dunkley.
Very good. Josh Dunkley at 17,690.
Yep,
that leaves him with two mid spots and a ruckman left.
Yep, and I'm going to plug in also Sam Hayes in the ruck.
Maybe Hayes.
I'm so glad I got my headphones on. My wife has some friends over, and the music choices they are listening to are just absolutely atrocious. I'm going to have to jump on the Spotify and take over soon. Plug in for me, my man Adam Treloar. And
that leaves you with 13,990 left.
Which is enough for two options here. I'm tossing up. You can choose, Smatho. Caleb Sarong or Tom Liberatore. Which one are you going for?
We've obviously the bond out. The head will say, yeah, get Libber in. But let's be contrarian. You want to win a ticket or you want to take down your GPP. If Caleb Sarong scores 10 more, then you have a leg up. So let's put Caleb in a smashing of the North Melbourne midfield.
I like it.
So there we go. So Roody's team from top to bottom: Josh Dunkley at 17,690, Jai Miss at 6, Conor Rosie at 10,9, Treloar at 13,580, Darcy Tucker at 8,1, Caleb Sarong at 13,2, Bailey Dale 13,7, Nathan O'Driscoll at 8,600, and Sammy Hayes at 7,270. All right, ready? That is the 2-game slate for Friday's $90,000 pool. Make sure you get the Draftstars to enter your entries into that particular contest. Make sure you log into Draftstars. There might be a little sneaky promotion there. I'm not allowed to say anything about it because it's against the rules, but there you go. This is probably my last week. Thank you, Rudy, for joining me today and talking about a mega 2-game slate. It's double the work there for you, and you've done really well, mate.
Thank you. Good to be back. And for once, you chose me over your wife, so I'm happy about that.
And good luck going back to your wife about that Spotify playlist, mate. As I can hear in my ear all show long. So, thank you for all our viewers and listeners. Good luck if you're on Draftstars, and we'll catch you for round 9 next week. Thanks, Rudy. Catch you then.